All right, greetings to you. This is Germane. Welcome to this next episode of Journey Through the Galactic Heritage Cards. And as we've said before, you don't necessarily have to be a student of the cards to benefit from this information, for we really do explore galactic history in an interesting way that can really be applicable to your lives here on Earth. And also, as we've said in the past, the most benefit can be obtained from these videos by watching from the beginning, so the information is cumulative and grows exponentially as you move through the cards. Okay, so today then, picking up from where we left off last time, we are now moving into the second era of the Sirian civilization. This era is very connected to you on Earth, as you will see as we move through the themes for today's cards. Now, just as a reminder, when we say second era, you're going to find on the card a time notation, past, present, future, or parallel. So when we say second era, we are referring to the cards that say present. We've kind of corrected that time mention to make it a little bit clearer that present is meaning second era. So the second era then of any physical civilization is the era in which they begin their healing and integration process before awakening. Now, if you're to look at the idea of civilizations having third density expressions and fourth density expressions, third density would mostly represent what you might call first era. Second era is as a species is beginning to move into fourth density, and what they experience and what the focus is as they begin to move into a fourth density expression. Now, if you don't understand what we mean by density, we're not going to explain it here, but you can really find a lot of that information in our other work, and of course in the book Prism of Lyra and many other places as well. Basically, we're talking about a process of evolution that civilizations go through when they incarnate physically. They go through an expression of very deep separation, which would be third density. And then they go into an era where they begin to integrate all the parts and they begin to remember who they are. And that is what we refer to as second era. So if we're talking then about the Sirian second era, you're going to find that their process of awakening has some connections to yours. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today in terms of the second era Sirian cards are really applicable to a lot of civilizations, but for the Sirians in particular, these were the things that they really focused on. So we're going to look then at the first card we have here, which is number 59, Unfinished Business. Now that terminology or that theme is quite clear in terms of what it's representing, but let's look at it on multi-levels, okay? Because on the physical level, of course, in your lives, unfinished business can mean simply the things that you're not wishing to attend to or wishing to finish or wishing to resolve. However, when you're looking at, on the soul level, reincarnational patterns as an example, it can also represent the things that have not been completed through the incarnational cycles. One of the things about the Sirian civilization is that they are very long-sighted. And what this means is that their consciousness has the ability to view things more through galactic time. So they have a lot of patience, and they recognize this idea of incarnational themes and having many lifetimes and working on things over and over again through cycles of incarnation. And this is not something that they find irritating, as many humans do, let's say, but they see it just as part of the nature of consciousness in its incarnational cycles. So when we're talking about unfinished business then regarding the Sirians, it really has to do with some of their original promises or commitments that they wish to make as mentors for the human civilization. Now, of course, in their early days and in your even earlier days, they were mentors for you physically on the planet. And the really interesting thing is that they were kind of a young species at that time also, although of course they were older than you. Now the Sirians that, let's say, evolved into the fourth density idea, which is represented by these cards, this Sirian consciousness is very, very aware of their cycles. Okay, so if you got the unfinished business in your reading, again, it can mean many things. And for a lot of people actually that get this card, usually they understand right away what it's referring to. But if you're not sure, we'll ask you to take a look first at your physical level, your physical life, what remains unfinished, and it's usually because there are certain things that maybe you have not wanted to address. So when we say unfinished business, we're not really talking about goals of the ego. It has more to do with the underlying patterns of healing that you came into this life to work on that maybe have been avoiding up until this point. Okay, so that's really how we'd like you to see this card of unfinished business. Now, the Sirians also had to deal with this idea as they were in their fourth density journey as well. And as you see as we go through these, it'll become a little bit clearer what it was that they really wanted to refine in themselves. But for now, for you as humans, we're going to say most strongly right now, it has to do with the issues of your own healing that you've not wanted to engage up until now, or maybe you felt stuck in. The energy is there for this to be worked on now, but it will require the courage to kind of dive right in. Okay, next we have number 60, Sirian, second era, present time stream. The theme is coming full circle. This is really kind of connected to the last card we were talking about, because when any civilization is entering a early fourth density expression, they begin to see that patterns that they've not healed from the past tend to cycle back and cycle back and cycle back. Maybe not repeating themselves exactly, but sometimes maybe repeating themselves more in a spiral, taking you to higher and higher levels of evolution. So when we're talking about coming full circle, that's what we're talking about, that perhaps things that have been started in the past, whether this life or other lives, but have been left unfinished, that you're being given an opportunity in a sense to spiral back to that beginning point. Beginning point is also, of course, ending point or shifting point, so that you move to the next plane of the spiral, so to speak, for the evolutionary process. So for the Sirians then, their work with humans, especially in this time period right now as you are transitioning in your fourth density or to your fourth density expression, for them, interacting with you is coming full circle, because they were interacting with you when they were beginning their fourth density expression, and also when you were a much younger civilization. So in a sense, they are following through with things that they have committed to very, very long time ago. Now, they have been supporting you this whole time. Sometimes it's not as evident as it is now, but The energy is there. Their commitment to you is coming full circle, so that when you and they enter that beginning/ending point, they can move it to the next plane of the experience and the relationship with you, if you allow it. What that means is basically that you have to go into your own healing process in a very committed and, well, dare we say, enthusiastic way. If you do, they are right there to support you. So if you get the Coming Full Circle card then in your reading, again, many different types of interpretations can be given depending on the other cards and your life situation and all of that. Perhaps within your life you are coming to the conclusion of something, or you're closing something, or you're avoiding doing so. Only you will know how this refers to you, but may we simply just add that it will always behoove you to do what you can to step forward and facilitate closure where you can, because the closure is going to help you on that spiral of evolution, so that as you move into fourth density, let's say you're not carrying as many heavy things in the suitcase of your baggage, so to speak, that you may have if you were not actively engaging the closure process. Okay, so that's the idea of coming full circle. Next we have number 61, creative communication. And again, it's Sirian, second era or present time stream as it's written on the card. So what do we mean by creative communication? Well, this particular card can also mean many things depending on circumstances. Sirian energy in general is very communicative, meaning that many of the consciousnesses that communicate with humans, whether through channeling or other means, are filled with a lot of wisdom and communication if that is allowed to be brought through. Sirians themselves are very communicative. And this is a lot because of their focus more in the upper energy centers, whereas Pleiadians are focused more in the heart, as an example. But it's also a message, again, about your movement into fourth density, because as you were a physical civilization in third density, you learned a certain way to communicate that was very linear, and that method served you well, or served you fine, in third density. But those same types of communication methods, if they are to be used as you are transitioning into fourth density now, they're simply not going to work. So you may find a lot of miscommunication between yourself and others. You might find a lot of frustration on your part, where you seem to not be able to communicate what you really want to communicate. And a lot of this is, again, because the old models within your consciousness for communication need an upgrade, so to speak. So what you're going to find then as you move into fourth density is that communication is going to have to become a little bit more holistic, meaning an integration of mind and heart, or thoughts and emotions, in a very different way than you knew it to be in third density. So if you have received the creative communication card in your reading, once again, we know we keep repeating it, but it depends on everything else in the reading and in your life. But it's an invitation for you to take a look at how you communicate in your life and how that can be upgraded. Now, communication is also very connected to the wounds and the fears of the ego. So the communication process, though you might only think of it as verbal, is verbal and nonverbal. So for instance, if you're communicating an idea in words that the ego has any kind of charge about internally, even unconsciously, that's where you're going to see that there's not a coherence between what's being said and what is being felt and what is being lived by the one communicating. As you go more and more into fourth density, you're going to find that those discrepancies between the unconscious ego stuff and what is being communicated, they're going to be highlighted. The discrepancies, so they're going to be highlighted much more. Therefore, it's an invitation for you as you move more into fourth density to begin aligning your communication. Now, how do you do that? Well, it goes back to knowing oneself. And it goes back to what we've always talked about in terms of exploring who you really are on the ego level, why the ego has the things that it does, the defense mechanisms, the buttons, the issues that trigger, whatever it is. If you can understand that and, in a sense, open yourself and not feel shame about it, your communication thus becomes more authentic, and the listener can then feel the authenticity of that communication. This was something your Sirian forefathers really worked a lot on, because they were very big on emotional healing during a certain portion of their evolution in fourth density. And they focused a lot on this idea of communication by really, in a sense, tearing apart their own belief systems and their own wounds to see what in there was shaping the distortion in their communication. So that's a clue for you. If you really, really want to align your communication with your authenticity, so to speak, you have to go into the ego and see what's there and see what drives the protection and projection and all of that. All right, so it's a little bit of shadow work there, but it is absolutely necessary for everyone in the transition into fourth density. Okay, and that leads us then, a good segue, into the final card here, which is number 62, Embracing Transition. Again, it's Sirius. It's second era or present time stream on the card. And again, we probably do not have to explain what that means. As we have opened this segment with, we talked about the transition from third to fourth density, and you are moving now into that fourth density reality much more solidly. What you're seeing externally, of course, is very shaky, very chaotic. You may also be feeling within yourself shaky and chaotic as well, with all sorts of creative and interesting symptomology, whether it be with the body. We've spoken to so many people, whether it's fevers or nausea or strange diet changes or skin conditions or exhaustion or too much energy, or maybe emotionally, strange emotional things coming up, maybe depression one day and elation the next. All of this is natural for a transitioning species. Your Sirian forefathers went through it. However, let's say they went through it a little bit easier because they were not as afraid of their emotions as humans are. So for humans, the fear of the emotional body, is, even from a very young age, has created that kind of protection mechanism, so to speak, so that as adults then, it's very finely tuned, the mechanism to circumvent the emotions. So in a sense, you are going to have to backtrack that and unwind that process a little bit and get back more organically with your emotional body. This is one of the ways you can embrace transition. If you fight against it, such as, well, I don't like what I'm feeling, I don't like what I'm seeing, I'm going to instead focus on the positive, I'm going to look at the rainbow instead of looking at the whole complete energy. If you allow yourself to do the shadow work, as we've been talking about for a bit, and really go into the emotional body and not worry so much about all the distractions on the physical level and all the pains, because they are an expression of the unexpressed emotional body, then that's going to be one way that you can embrace the transition. No, it's going to be a cycle like this. Some days perhaps very high, other days very low. And while in the early period of fourth density transition, the sine wave may be very dramatic, eventually the hills and valleys begin to level out, so to speak, and the sine wave gets a little bit more balanced. It especially does that as you do your inner work. So if you have gotten this card in your reading, then you know exactly what we're going to say, probably. It might be referring to a very specific and very clear transition you are experiencing in your life, or it may be referring to something a little bit more subtle that has to do with the transition into fourth density. In that case, then, the idea of embracing is really referring to not only you and your personal experience, but also the experience of the collective, which means then that when you look out into the world and you see all the craziness with the leaders of your world acting strangely and things such as that, know it is a byproduct of the transition. The universe itself makes no mistakes. You might not like what you see, but there are no mistakes. Therefore, you will find that peace and you will allow yourself to experience that sine wave in a more harmonic way as you just embrace what is happening, let go, ride the wave, so to speak. All right? So that concludes the Sirian second era for today. In the next card section, sorry for the tease, we're going to go into another civilization also in terms of their fourth density transition as well and how it connects with you. All right, thank you for your attention, and until next time, we send much love.